Worksheet day 4, again in the Math Foundations, continuing on with fractions. We're going to start with adding and subtracting mixed numbers. It lets me move here. There we go. So when I add and subtract mixed numbers, again, kind of like on those ones where I subtracted those fractions, I like to line things up and down. If I'm going to take 1 and 1/5 and add 7 and 2/3, what I'm doing is going to add the fraction part first, and then I have to find a common denominator, simplify my fraction, add the whole numbers, and then combine what I have. So in this case, if I have 1/5 plus 2/3, just worrying about adding the fraction part, I have to have my common denominator. 3 and 5 don't have any common factors, so I multiply them together. 3 times 5 is 15, so 15 is going to be my common denominator. 5 goes into 15, 3 times 1 is 3. 3 goes into 15, 5 times 2 is 10. So I'm going to take 3/15 plus 10/15. I'm just adding the numerators, and I would get 13/15. Now, if I could rewrite that, I would, but I can't simplify it. It isn't lowest terms. It isn't an improper fraction, so I'm done with the fraction part. So now I just add the whole number part. 1 plus 7 is 8, so I get 8 and 13/15. Now again, when you're working with mixed numbers on your calculator, when you enter that in, you put the 1, hit the fraction button, the 1 on the top, hit the fraction button, and the 5 to do 1 and 1/5. So 1 fraction 5 plus 7 fraction 2 fraction 3. So 1 and 1/5 plus 7 and 2/3, and I should end up with 8 and 13/15, which is what I got for my answer. The second one, they did one in the form of a word problem. At least I have a little more room to write. Marston Real Estate purchased 144 7/10 acres of land on the west side of town. The company also purchased an adjoining plot of land that contained 42 1/5 acres. What was the total number of acres? So I have 144 7/10 as one of my plots and 42 1/5 as my other plot. So again, I'm going to start by adding the fraction part. If I'm going to add the fraction part, I have to have a common denominator. 5 does go into 10, so 10 is your least common multiple. So the 7/10 isn't going to change, but the 1/5 we need over 10. 5 goes into 10, 2 times 1 is 2. So 7/10 plus 2/10 is going to give me 9/10. Again, that is a proper fraction in lowest terms. I can't change it to a mixed number. I'm just going to leave it. So now I'm going to add the whole number parts. 4 plus 2 is 6. 4 plus 4 is 8. And so I get 1/86 and 9/10 for my answer. So on these ones, when you're entering them in your calculator, if you want to check it, you do the 144, hit the fraction button, 7 fraction tenths, plus 42, hit the fraction button, 1 fraction 5. And we get 1/86 and 9/10, which is what we got anyway. The next one there, during July, Hodges Manufacturing purchased the following amounts of gasoline. Week 1, 26 3/4 gallons. Week 2, 10 gallons. Week 3, 29 1/2 gallons. Week 4, 11 1/10 gallons. How many gallons did he make during the month of July? So again, we're going to add 26 3/4 plus 10 plus 29 1/2 plus 11 1/10. And so when we're doing all of those fractions, we need a common denominator. And so in this case, I need a multiple that 4, 2, and 10 go into. I like to start with the two bigger numbers. The least common multiple here would be 20, and 2 does divide into 20, so I can use 20. So 4 goes into 20, 5 times 3 is 15, 2 goes into 20, 2 times 1 is 2, 2 goes into 20. Fix that one there. I don't know what I'm doing there. 2 goes into 20, 10 times 1 is 10. And 10 goes into 20, 2 times 1 is 2. We'll get the right ones there. So 3/4 is 15/20, 1/2 is 10/20, and 1/10 is 2/20. So if I add those, 15 plus 10 plus 2 would give me 27/20. 27/20 is an improper fraction. I need to rewrite that as a mixed number. So I'm dividing 20 into 27. Goes in there once with 7 left over. So 1 and 7/20 is what I get as my mixed number. So then I add my whole numbers together. So if I add this, I would get 10 plus 6 is 16. Carry my 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 76. So I have to remember I'm taking 76 plus my 1 and 7/20. So my total then, 76 plus 1 is 77 and 7/20. And that would be gallons. Okay. And so again, if I want to double check with my calculator, I'm doing 26 fraction 3 fraction 4ths plus 10 plus 29 fraction 1 fraction 2 plus 11 fraction 1 fraction 10, and I end up with 77 and 7/20, which is the same thing we got when we did it paper pencil. Number 4, 5, and 6 here. It says at the beginning of January, Barbara Scott's heating oil tank held 52 1/4 gallons of heating oil. At the end of the month, it held 9 1/10 gallons. How many gallons did she use during the month? So if this was our starting and this is our ending, we can subtract to figure out the difference. How much did we use in the month? So I'm going to do 52 1/4. I'm going to subtract 9 1/10. And again, since I'm subtracting fractions, I have to have a common denominator. And with a 10 and a 4, my least common denominator is 20. So 4 goes into 20 5 times, I get 5/20. 10 goes into 20 2 times. And in this case, we can take 2 away from 5, so we're just going to subtract. 5 minus 2 gives me 3/20. And then I have to subtract with my whole numbers. Make that a 4, borrow, make that 12. 12 minus 9 is 3, and so I get 43 3/20 for how many gallons I used. And so again, if I wanted to check that with my calculator, I'm just subtracting 52 fraction 1 fraction 4th minus 9 fraction 1 fraction 10th, and I get 43 3/20. Number 5, at the beginning of August, Tom Jenkins had accumulated 24 1/2 days of sick leave, but he was sick with the flu and missed 7 7/8 work days during the month. How many days does he still have at the end of the month? So again, I started with 24 1/2, but I used some of them up, so I'm going to subtract them off, 8 7/8. My common denominator here, since 2 does go into 8, is 8. 2 goes into 8 4 times 1 is 4/8. 1/2 is the same thing as 4/8. And here the 7/8 isn't going to change. But our problem here is going to be that I can't take 7 away from 4. So this time when I'm borrowing, I'm not borrowing in terms of 10. I'm borrowing in terms of eighths, because 8 is my denominator. So what I do is I go over to my whole number and I take 1 off of there. That makes that 23 instead of 24. But when I add 1, I'm going to add it in terms of eighths. So whatever my denominator is, I'm going to have the same number over itself. 1 is equal to 8/8 or 7/7 or 10/10 or 5/5, whatever it may be. So that 4/8 plus 8/8 gives me 12/8, which is the same thing as having 1 and 4/8. Now I can take 7 away from 12. 12 minus 7 gives me 5/8, and I'm going to subtract 8 from 23. So here I make that a 1 and borrow, and 13 minus 8 is 5, so I get 15 5/8. So again, just to double check, I would take 24 fraction 1 fraction 2 minus 8 fraction 7 fraction eighths, and I get 15 and 5 eighths, which is sure enough what I'm supposed to end up with. So the hard thing here when you borrow was when you have to borrow 1, same number over itself. Whatever the denominator is over itself is added to your fraction. Number 6, Marston Real Estate purchased 75 1/3 acres of land on the west side of town. The company planned to use 67 1/6 acres for residential development. The remainder of the property will be given to the city for a park. How many acres will be given to the city? So we have 75 1/3, but we're going to use part of it for development, 67 1/6. We want to know how much they have left for the park to be. So again, subtracting fractions, we have to have a common denominator. 3 does go into 6. So 3 goes into 6, 2 times 1, 1/3 is 2/6. The 6/6 doesn't have to change, and fortunately on this one we can take 1 away from 2, so we don't have to borrow. 2 minus 1 is 1, so we get 1/6. And then we have to subtract. We have to borrow here. 15 minus 7 would be 8, and so 8 1/6 is what we have left over. So again, 75 fraction 1 fraction 1/3 minus 67 fraction 1 fraction, whoops, I hit the wrong button, fraction 6 gives me 8 1/6, which is what we ended up with. Number 7, we are multiplying mixed numbers. When we multiply or divide mixed numbers, we have to convert them to improper fractions first, before we can do our multiplying and dividing. So when I convert this to an improper fraction again, I'm taking the denominator times the whole number and adding the numerator. 5 times 6 is 30, 30 plus 2 would be 32. Denominator should stay the same, fifths. Times 5 times 10 is 50. 50 plus 3 is 53 fifths. Now, if I were going to, or if I could, I would reduce. But I can't reduce 5 with 32 or 5 with 53, so I just have to multiply. 5 times 5 on the bottom, that's easy. That's 25. Otherwise, on the top, I have to take 32 times 53. I'm going to put the 53 on top because it really doesn't matter my order. So 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 5 is 10. Got to go to the 10 spot, so I add my 0. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 5 is 15. So I get 1,696 over 25. Now, I want to then convert my improper fraction to my mixed number and put it in lowest terms. So I'm going to take 25 and divide it into 1,696. 25 doesn't go into 16. 25 goes into 169 6 times. I like to think of 25 like quarters. How many quarters would I have? Well, I'd have 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150, 6 times. 150. Subtracting, I get 196 because I have 19 and then the 6 comes down. 25 into 196 goes 7 times, which would be 175. If I subtract, I get 21. So I get for an answer 67 and 21/25. Again, if I want to double check that with my calculator, I do 6 fraction 2 fraction 5 times 10 fraction 3 fraction fifths, and I end up with 67 and 21/25, which of course was what we got when we did it the long way. And unfortunately, on the Alex program, it doesn't let me add space to these pages that I produce. It just prints them out however they feel like it. So there's not always a lot of writing space. The wood pen set assembly line at Northeastern Products is capable of producing 7 1/10 products an hour. Today, the firm operated the assembly line for a total of 8.5 hours. How many wood pen sets were produced during that 8 1/5 hours time? So I can do 7 1/10 every hour, so just about 7 an hour. I'm going to work for 8 1/5 hours, so 8 hours. So 7 times 8 is 56. I know I'm going to have a little more than 56 because I have those fraction parts. But my whole thing is I'm taking 7 1/10 times 8 1/5. Making my improper fractions. 10 times 7 would be 70 plus 1, so 71 tenths. 5 times 8 is 40, 40 plus 1, so 41 fifths. Again, they didn't make it very nice. I can't reduce it all. The bottom's easy to multiply. 10 times 5 is 50. The top I'm going to have to go ahead and multiply. 71 times 41. So 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 7 is 7. Going over to the 10 spot, 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 7 is 28. So I am going to get 1, 1, carry my 1, 9, 2. 2,911 when I multiply that out. And then I want to change my improper fraction to a mixed number, so I'm going to divide 50 into 2,911. 50 doesn't go into 29, so 50 into 29 would be 5 times. 5 times 0 is 0, 5 times 5 is 25. I have a 4 and a 1 and a 1, so 50 into 411 would be 8 times 5 is 40, so 400. And I got 11 left over, so 58 and 11 50ths is what I end up with. We said it should be about 56 when we estimated. Well, that's pretty close. We'll double check it with the calculator. 7 fraction 1 fraction tenth times 8 fraction 1 fraction fifth gives me 58 and 11 50ths, which is what we got. Alright, problem number 9 here. Tom Collins' car consumed 5 3/5 gallons of gas and averaged 13 3/4 miles per gallon. How many miles did Tom drive on this trip? So if we think about it, if I average 13 3/4 miles per gallon and I use 5 3/4 gallons of gas, I have to multiply my miles that I went, or miles per gallon, times the number of gallons that I went, right? If I got 5 miles per gallon and I use 5 gallons of gas, 5 times 5, I went 25 miles. So in this case, I have to take the 13 3/4 miles per gallon times the 5 3/5 gallons of gas that I used. I'm going to multiply these out. I have to first of all convert to improper fractions. So 4 times 13 would be 52 plus 3 would be 55 fourths. 5 times 5 is 25, plus 3 would be 28 fifths. On this one, it's a little nicer because I can do some reducing. 55 and 5 are both divisible by 5. 5 goes into there once and into there 11 times. 4 and 28 I can reduce. 4 goes into 4 once and 28 7 times. So 4 times 7 is 77. 1 times 1 is 1. 77 over 1 means I went 77 miles. And again, if I just want to double check with my calculator, I'm going to do 13 fraction 3 fraction fourths times 5 fraction 3 fraction fifths. And sure enough, I get 77. So whenever we multiply or divide with mixed numbers, our first step is to make that improper fraction and then do it just like we did our other multiplying and dividing. No common denominators when you multiply and divide fractions. 10, 11, and 12. Divide the following mixed numbers. Be sure to convert them to improper fractions, and then we're going to change our improper fractions back to mixed numbers at the end. So in this case, I have to convert 11 and 7/12 into an improper fraction. I'm going to start by taking 12 times 11. I don't know that in my head, so I got to multiply it out. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 1 is 1. Bring my 0 down. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. So I get 132 plus my 7, which would be 139/12 then. This is still dividing for now because all I'm doing is changing to an improper fraction. 7 times 4 is 28, 29, 30, so 30/7. Now since I'm dividing fractions, I have to invert that second fraction and multiply by the reciprocal. So the first fraction stays 139/12. I'm going to multiply it by the reciprocal, so 7/30. And again, I was hoping I'd be able to reduce, but I can't reduce the 7 and the 12. I can reduce the 139 and the 30 a little bit because they're both divisible by 3, because this, nope, 3 is not going to go into there. If it was just 39 it would. I don't think I can reduce that. So I'm just going to have to go ahead and multiply. So 139 times 7, 363, so 21, so 21 plus 6 would be 27, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to have 973 on top, 12 times 30, add my 0, 6, 360, and so I get 973/360. Now I have to go ahead and divide that out to make my improper fraction. So 360 into 973. I think 3 times is going to be too big, so I'm going to have to go with 2 times. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 6 is 12. Carry my 1. 6 plus 1 is 7. And so I get a 3, a 5, and a 2 left over. So I have 2 and 253/360. Lovely. And so just double checking that answer, I took 11 fraction 7 fraction 12ths. I divided by 4 fraction 2 fraction 7ths, and I got 2 and 253/360, which is what we ended up with, so we did it right. Number 11 is the same kind of thing. Since I kind of wrote down on number 11 spot, I'm going to write with a different color. Here, changing that into an improper fraction. 12 times 12 is 144 plus 5. 144 plus 5 would be 149/12. 9 times 11 would be 99, so 99 plus 5 would be 104/9. I'm dividing, so I have to invert and multiply. So I'm going to have 149/12 times the reciprocal, 9/104. Can't think of anything that would go into 149 and 104, but the 9 and the 12 can be reduced a little bit. I can divide by 3. 3 goes into 9 3 times and into 12 4 times. Switch colors here. And so I've got to take 149 times 3 and 104 times 4. So 149 times 3. 9 times 3 is 27. 3 times 4 is 12, 13, 14. 3 plus 1 is 4, so 447. And then 104 times 4, we get 416. If I do that quick in my head. And so changing that into a mixed number, I have to do my long division. So 416 into 447, only going to go one time. We can see that hopefully. And I have to subtract, and I get 31 left over. So I get 1 and 31 over the 416, which was my denominator. Smush that right in there. And then I'm going to double check it with my calculator. So 12 fraction 5 fraction 12ths divided by 11 fraction 5 fraction 9ths. And I get 1 and 31 over 416, which is what we got smushed in there, and so we did it correctly. So I was advised, do it on your paper, check it with your calculator. If you're not getting the same answer, go back and check your work, see what you did. Because it's important to learn the process of how to do this other than just hitting buttons on your calculator. Number 12, Perry Products Incorporated purchases rolls of terry cloth that are 28 3/4 feet long. In order to make towels, the cloth is cut into 2 3/4 foot lengths. So I started with a big piece. I'm cutting off pieces that are each 2 3/4 lengths. They want to know how many towels they can make from one roll of cloth. So again, I'm going to end up having to divide this big piece of cloth into smaller pieces. So I'm going to take my 28 3/4. I'm going to divide it by the 2 3/4. So again, since I'm working with mixed numbers, I have to change them into improper fractions. 28 times 4. 4 times 8 is 32. And I have 8, 9, 10, 11. So I get 112 plus the 3. So 115 fourths. Here I have 8, 9, 10, 11, 11 fourths. And so since I'm dividing, I have to invert and multiply. So 115 fourths times 4 elevenths. I can reduce a little bit because 4 goes into 4 once and into 4 once. So 115 times 1 is 115. 1 times 11 is still 11. And so I have 115 over 11. I end up having to divide to make my mixed number. 11 into 115. 11 goes into 11 once. 11. I get a remainder of 0. 11 does not go into 5. Don't forget to put that 0 in there. Goes in there 10 times, and I have 5 11ths left over. So 10 and 5 11ths is what I can do. So actually I can make 10 towels, but I got a little bit left over. So again, I'm going to take my 28 fraction 3 fraction fourth. I'm going to divide it by 2 fraction 3 fraction fourths. And I should get 10 and 5 11ths, which is what I did. So that was the end of homework day 4 there.